Boys and girls, it is my great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce to you two men who have been very significant leaders in our local community and the state of Georgia and beyond. And we have with us Georgia State Representative Tyrone Brooks and Bobbie Howard, who was also active in the start of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is one of Dr. King's primary organizations, local chapter in Monroe Social Circle, Georgia. And both of these men knew Dr. King and worked with Dr. Martin Luther King personally, yes. And so they're going to tell us about the local history. There's a lot of really neat local history in Social Circle in Monroe, Georgia, right where a lot of you guys have grown up. And so I'm very grateful that you're here, and it's a wonderful message that you have to bring to us.
We'll let Robert go first. Give him a hand. Mr. Robert Howard, Social Circle.
Well, I got a chance to meet Dr. King back in 1967 through Mr. Dan Young, who was a good friend of Dr. King. Tyrone will give you the story how many times that Dr. King actually stayed in the Social Circle. But Mr. Young was president of the local NAACP chapter, and he was wanting us to organize an SCLC chapter, so we messed around. That's what we did. And I met Tyrone Brooks in 1967, so we've been just like brothers for all these years, and we worked together. We did a lot of stuff together. But we organized that chapter, and we started attending to local things that was going on in Walton County that just wasn't right. We made a lot of corrections. We did a lot of work. And in fact, the day that Dr. King got killed, we were sent to Blossom Games place over in Monroe to let him know that Dr. King would be flying into Walton County. And would it be okay for his plane to land there? He told us, yeah, it wasn't nothing he could do because he wasn't over that, you know. But then when we got back to Social Circle, my yard was full of folks, and I pulled up in the yard, and people were coming to the car crying, and they was telling me that Dr. King had just been shot in Memphis, Tennessee. So he hadn't got killed in Memphis. He had been back to Walton County. But what we did was, we are living Dr. King's dream. And as we look into the face of all you young people here today, you know, just keep in mind that education should be your #1 priority. You know, we living in the best country there is on the face of this earth, and if it's going to continue to be so, then we're going to need people like you. And when we see you all this excited and this much interested in the history of the United States, and then you're going to be our leaders on tomorrow. You know, so we're really proud of you guys, and the stuff that we are doing. We're trying to correct a lot of stuff where, you know, it shouldn't be things that you have to face once you get to that plateau, you know. So me and Tyrone, we don't, not only me and him, but it's a bunch of us, you know, we're not going to stop trying to have this place like it ought to be. And Tyrone just mentioned to the other group about violence, you know, Dr. King was against violence, you know. This is what we came up and came into the movement. We don't believe in violence. You know, this drug thing, you know, as many of our young people, this is taken out, it should be easy for us to get together and stop those drugs. But it's a lot that can be done and need to be done now. And when we see you all come to a situation like this and have you looking into your face, you know, then what you do, you think that we inspire you, but you inspire us to do more and do better.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Howard. Give him a hand, children. All right. Thank you. Always such a wonderful pleasure to be with you today. Are y'all happy that we came?
Yeah!
Well, we're happy that you came. Thank you for coming. And I want to thank the Susan Purrs for extending an invitation to bring us to your school today. It is absolutely a treat to be with you today. I just want you to know that. I really do. Now, some of us may not know the legacy or the history of Dr. King as much as others. You're very young, you're studying, you're busy, there's a lot coming at you, you got the internet. Dr. King didn't have an internet. Did y'all know that? Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have a cell phone. You know that? Dr. King didn't have a fax machine. Think about that. How many of you really know the life of Dr. King? How many of you have read any of Dr. King's literature, his books? How many of you have books of Dr. King in your home? How many of you have seen a documentary on television or movie, a news clip on television when we are celebrating his birthday or the day of his assassination? How many of you know absolutely nothing about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Nothing, zero. How many of you know absolutely nothing about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? 1, 2, no, nothing? How many of you don't know the name Martin Luther King? Anybody in the room who does not know the name Martin Luther King Jr.? Is anybody in the room? I didn't think so. Now, you know what? If I was in any other school, anywhere in Georgia, anywhere in the USA or North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and I say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the children would just jump up and scream, because all around the world, Dr. King's name is more renowned and more of a household word or words than here in the United States. It's real. And he was born in Atlanta, Georgia, right? Atlanta, Georgia? You've been to Atlanta, right? Where in Atlanta have you been? Where in Atlanta you been?
Ciao, baby.
You been to the Capitol? You need to come to the Capitol to see me. That's where I am. You been on Auburn Avenue where Dr. King was born?
No.
Tell your parents to take you to Auburn Avenue, and you want to visit Dr. King's birth home. You've been to his birth home? You've been to his birth home? You've been to the birth home? Well, how many of you have been to the birth home? Stand up. If you've been to the birth home, stand up. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wow. What did you think of the birth home compared to your home?
Amazing.
Huh? Amazing. Did you go inside? All of you went inside? Did you buy a book? Medallion? Anything? Did your parents have any money? Yes, they did. They got credit cards, they didn't have cash. How many of you went into Ebenezer Baptist Church where he preached? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow. How many of you went to the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change? All right, just curious. I'm checking you out now. You see, the reason I wanted you to know that he was born on Auburn Avenue is because Auburn Avenue, when he was born in 1929, was not the street that it is today. You can have your seats now. It was not, you can't imagine it. No, you can't. I can't really imagine it either. But it was not the street that you see today, because you go to Atlanta now and you come up Peachtree, your parents driving or you at the school, and you see Auburn running into Peachtree. And when you walk down Auburn, you see these tall buildings. There were no tall buildings on Auburn Avenue when Dr. King was born. There were a lot of dirt streets around Auburn. Auburn may have been dirt in 1929. You can't imagine 1929. You cannot imagine 2009. So, yeah, 2009. But Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a native son of Atlanta and Georgia. And we take it for granted. But around the world, you call that name out, God, it's just like magic. It's like magic. And so I want you to be as excited in Loganville, Walton County, Gwinnett County, about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not a medical doctor, a PhD. I want you to be as excited when you hear the name Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as students are in Johannesburg, South Africa, or Beirut, Lebanon, or Seoul, South Korea, or Moscow. You got it? Or Beijing. I want you to be just as excited as those children. When you say Martin Luther King, I was introduced in Durban, South Africa one year to some students about your age, and they, in their introduction, they said, this young man met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was about 15, going on 15 years old. And all of the students said, wow. Yes, I was about going on 15 when I met him, and the only reason I met him is because Reverend Jose Williams, my supervisor at SCLC, introduced us children to Dr. King. We were just, coming into high school. I want you to understand something about Dr. King that I want you to carry with you. Dr. King was a non-violent philosopher and a non-violent leader. Do y'all believe in non-violence? How many of you believe in non-violence? If you believe in non-violence, stand up. If you don't stand, that means you believe in violence. All right? Everybody standing? Because those who are sitting, I want to stay away from you because you might be a violent person. Yeah, you didn't stand up on that. You can have your seat now. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed in peace, love, non-violence. And I want you to study those principles about Dr. King. You can Google Dr. King. You can go to the library and get a book. You can study him. It's easy for you to access information on Dr. King. And ask your parents to buy you some of Dr. King's books. Purchase, build your little library at home around Dr. King. Yes, letter from the Birmingham jail is something I want you to remember. You all got great memories, so you can remember. You don't have to write it down. One of them is letter from the Birmingham jail. Another one is, where do we go from here? Chaos or community. Yes, I want you to ask your parents to purchase you some books on Dr. King. And I want you to read those books. Because you know what? If you study Dr. King, 9 times out of 10, you're going to grow up and be a perfect, almost perfect model citizen. Almost perfect model citizen. If you study Dr. King, you're going to grow up and be successful. If you study Dr. King, you won't get into drugs and alcohol and violence and crime, and you'll stay away from bad people who will pull you into bad things. If you study Dr. King, I promise you, whatever your dreams are in life, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know what you want to be?
Doctor.
She wants to be a doctor. Woo! She got her mind made up already. Doctor. She said, doctor quick. She can become a doctor if she studied Dr. King's and the principles of nonviolence, peace, and love. And you know what? You can be the best doctor in the world. You can be whatever your dreams are. You can be whatever your goals are. Doctor, lawyer, scientist, teacher, counselor, superintendent. One of you may be superintendent of the school system here in Walton or Gwinnett County one day. Yeah, you. One of you might be a state representative like me one day, or state senator, or congressperson, or what? You might be president of the United States, one of you. Wouldn't that be cool? That somebody from this school grows up, stays out of trouble, stays in that principle of nonviolence, peace, and love, and all of a sudden that person is President of the United States. Wouldn't that be something to have the President of the United States come from this school? What about this class? Wouldn't that be something? Just think about President Barack Obama. The little school he was growing up in Hawaii, that little school can now claim him as one of their own. Just think about that. When he was your age, going to school just like you are now, he had no idea that he would be where he is. I had no idea that I will be where I am today, and I don't consider myself anywhere or anything really, but just think, when I was a little boy, growing up down in Warren County, Georgia, on down the road, like you're going to Augusta, that way, I had no idea I'd be wearing. But nonviolence, staying in school, obeying my parents, getting my work, going to bed on time at night, getting up early in the morning, getting my breakfast. Yeah, Those are the things that made it possible for me to be where I am. So Robert Howard and I are products of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we're proud of it. And we want you to study Dr. King. We want you to really digest Dr. King's works, his writings in particular. You can't be like Dr. King, but you can take some of those good things about Dr. King and use them as a model to work around to build your life to some extent. Non-violence, or non-existence is what Dr. King was saying. Dr. King said, we will live lives of non-violence, or there will be no lives to live because we will all be non-existence. He said, we will learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we shall perish apart as fools. Now these are words of Dr. King. How many of you believe in diversity? But you know what diversity is? Who can define diversity for me? Do you really know what diversity means? You know what it means. You know what diversity means. Come and tell me. Come and tell me what diversity, the word diversity means. Diversity. What's your name? Hannah.
Diversity is our differences
That is right.
between each other and like how my hair is different color than my friend's hair.
Or your skin may be a different color from you. Or your eyes, or your ethnicity, your race, your religion. You got it. Give her a hand. See that? Now, guess what? Our strength is centered around our diversity. Diversity is good. America is a melting pot of the whole world. You know that? We all, if we study our ancestry, most of us can find a way to go back to Europe, Africa, Asia. You know, we study, and that great diversity is what made America great. So we must appreciate our diversity. We must learn to live together and respect each other in spite of our differences. Wouldn't it be a very dull world if we all looked alike, all thought alike, all like the same food, same clothing? I mean, we would be like robots, wouldn't we? How dull would that be, huh? So isn't it great to be diverse? Isn't it wonderful to appreciate our diversity? Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it? We don't like the same foods, do we? What did you eat today? Breakfast.
I ate French toast.
What did you have?
Cereal.
See there? French toast and cereal. You know what I had? Oatmeal. Yeah, And guess what I've been drinking driving from Atlanta up here to your school today? Guess what I was drinking on the way? Water. Not sodas. Water. H2O. Water. Drink a lot of water. Drink a lot of water. Eat your vegetables. Eat your fruits. So you can grow and be healthy and strong. Now, one final thing, and I'm going to take more questions, I guess. And Susan, you tell us when to stop, because I know you have to do some other things, and you're going to dismiss, and they're going to go home in a few minutes.
Well, I want to make sure they hear about, how Dr. King used to come to.
You taught me about how Dr. King used to come and stay with.
Oh, yeah.
And also how he found out about the Morse board lynching.
Oh, those are two very important topics that Robert and I need to bring to your attention. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., even though he was a worldwide famous man, known around the world, he always came back home to Atlanta. He would preach sermons at Ebenezer Baptist Church on Auburn Avenue. I want you to visit one day with your parents or with the school. But he would always end up over at Mr. Dan Young's farm in Social Circle, because he and Mr. Dan Young were very good friends. So he would come to Mr. Dan Young's farm, and You know, he wanted to get out of Atlanta, the hustle and bustle. He wanted a quieter environment so he could really think and concentrate. So he would come to Mr. Dan Young's farm, which is like 30, 40 minutes from Atlanta, and he would just go and relax, sit on the back porch, and listen to the birds sing. You know what I mean? He would just listen to the wind blowing in the trees, and he could meditate, and he would do a lot of writing on Mr. Young's farm because it was so peaceful and quiet. And sometimes he would call his wife, Miss Coretta, his beautiful wife, Miss Coretta Scott King, and say, Coretta, come on over to the farm. I'm in social circle today. I'll bring the children. Bring Yolanda. Bring Martin III. Bring Dexter. Bring Bernice. Y'all just come on over to the farm and spend a day or two with me. And sometimes the children and Miss Coretta would come, and then they'd go back to Atlanta, leave Dr. King at the farm. Dr. King wrote a lot of his books on Mr. Young's farm. And that farm, Bobbie, the farm is gone now, isn't it? It's not a farm anymore. It's not a farm anymore. But it's a little place right off Highway 11 in Social Circle. And Dr. King spent a lot of time. Mr. Dan Young, who owned a funeral home in Monroe and one in Covington, his daughter Ariel inherited those businesses and she's running them today. But Mr. Young was a very prosperous businessman, very successful businessman. So he had a connection to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Ralph David Abernathy, and they could get Mr. Young to come to Atlanta and do things for the organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Are y'all going to remember that word? Those words? Say Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Just remember these four letters. SCLC. SCLC. If you can't remember Southern Christian Leadership Conference, you can remember SCLC, because SCLC stands for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That was Dr. King's organization. Mr. Young was a big supporter of that organization. That's the organization that raised me up, along with other children from around the country, and made us whatever we are today. Whatever we are today. It had an impact on Robert Howard's life in Social Circle. And we want Dr. King's legacy to have an impact on your lives. Okay? Now, the final thing is this. One of the projects on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s agenda was the Moores Ford Bridge lynchings. On July 25th, 1946, two African-American couples, Roger Malcolm, Dorothy Malcolm, George Dorsey, and Maybury Dorsey, and Dorothy Malcolm was 7 months pregnant. They were murdered on the Moores Ford Bridge by a mob of Ku Klux Klansmen. You've heard of the Ku Klux Klan. You've read about the Ku Klux Klan. They murdered the Malcolms and Dorseys, and Dr. King and President Harry Truman even got involved and ordered an investigation by the federal government, but no one has ever been arrested or prosecuted in the case. Dr. King was 17 years old when those lynchings occurred, and he carried that case on his heart all the way till his death. How old was Dr. King when he died? Who absolutely knows how old Dr. King was when he died? Now you gotta be sure now. Are you sure? You don't. Come tell me. You absolutely sure? All right.
39.
Oh, he's got it. Give him a hand. 39, 39, 39. How old are you?
9.
He is 9. Dr. King was 39. What's your name?
Ryan
Ryan what?
Watkins.
Mr. Ryan Watkins got it. He had it. The other class, I had a hard time finding anyone that knew the exact age of Dr. King. So he's been studying Dr. King. He's been reading Dr. King, this young man right here. So it makes me feel good when children know something unique about Dr. King. You know, it makes me feel good when they know something about Dr. King. But he was only 39. Now I know 39 to you today seems like old, doesn't it? No. Oh, it doesn't? Oh, okay. Well, what is old to you then? What is live to be 100. There's a lady in Monroe, she's 116. Her name is Miss Bessie Cooper in Monroe. She just turned 116 years old. And you're not even 16. But Dr. King had the Morris Ford Bridge case on his agenda. Now finally, let me give you this little tidbit, and we're going to close out, because I know you got to go. The last time Robert and I saw Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. live, give me your attention now, because you're going home in a minute. I know you're getting kind of antsy. You want to get out of here. You're busy all day. You want to go home? We'll get on the buses and go home. No. Yes, you do. No. Let me give you this little tidbit of information I want you to remember this now. I want you to remember this now. Miss Purse is recording this, so you can go back and see the video, particularly on her website, Earth Family TV. But listen to this. Dr. King was 17 when the lynchings occurred. He was 39 when he died. The Malcolms and Dorsey's were in their early 20s when they were killed. Early 20s. 20, like 20 years old, 21 years old. So Dr. King told us on March 21st, 1968, we were at a church in Macon, Georgia, New Zion Baptist Church, that when he and Dr. Ralph Abernathy finished helping the sanitation workers, you know those men that come around on those big trucks to pick up your garbage? Yeah. They come to the back of the school with those big trucks, with those dumpsters, and they load up the garbage, the trash that we accumulate. Well, Dr. King was in Memphis, Tennessee, trying to help those men and women get better working conditions, more benefits and insurance and retirement and better wages. That's where he was when he was killed. 2 weeks before he died, Robert and I were in Macon, Georgia with him in a big rally. It was 500 people there. And we heard Dr. King say, when Ralph David Abernathy and I finished with the sanitation workers in Memphis, we are coming to Monroe, Georgia to take on the Morris Ford Bridge lynching case. The night that Dr. King was assassinated at the age of 39 in Memphis, Tennessee, he was scheduled to fly on a little private jet owned by the United Automobile Workers Union. And he was going to come from Memphis, Tennessee to Monroe to begin to work on the Morris Ford Bridge lynchings. He was killed in Memphis. He couldn't come, obviously. But his best friend in the world, Ralph David Abernathy, came. Hosea Williams came. Reverend Joseph Lowry came. Reverend Jesse Jackson. Ambassador Andrew Young. Yeah. Congressman John Lewis. Yeah. Yeah. Reverend C.T. Vivian. Senator Charles Steele. I'm trying to keep y'all from biting your nails. But I want you to know that Robert Howard and I are an extension of Dr. King's work. We just continue to do the work, and we're not the only ones. There are people all over the world who are working now to help fulfill the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we want you, children, we want you to grow and be a part of the movement to fulfill the dream of Dr. King. For that beloved community, that nonviolent community, that diverse community that we are so proud of globally. We want you to learn to be an extension of King, living the King principles, being a part of that dream. Dr. King would say, children, as you grow, complete your education, get on track to fulfill your dreams, whatever they may be. You're sleepy, aren't you? You ready to go? We're going in a minute. Dr. King would say, children, just do the best you can to help somebody. To help the poor, the homeless, help those who are less fortunate than we are. Just make this a better world. Peace and justice for all of us. He wants you to have the best opportunities for an education, living in a clean environment, you know, being away from the violence and the drugs and the crime and all of the bad things in our world. He wants you to have a good life. Don't you want a good life? Yes. All right. You're going to stay in school, right? Yes. You're going to get those degrees and become the doctors and The lawyers and the teachers and the counselors and the engineers and scientists and astronauts and elected officials and president. You're going to do that, right? So that's about all. Anything else, Susan, before we close? I know you got to get out of here now. It's about time to dismiss, isn't it?
You got
Getting
about,
close to dismissal?
You got about 10 minutes for questions.
We got about 10 minutes for questions. Robert going to take some questions. I'll take a few also. Let's start over here. Seems like I drift to the right too much. Let's come over in on this. I drift to the right for some reason. I don't know why. Come up and give me your name and what's your question? Your name first.
Chase.
Chase what?
Chase Bailey.
Okay. Question.
I know the first. I know the first name of the man who killed him.
You're thinking of James Earl Ray. But let me tell you something, because in the class before you, the two young students walked up to us after everyone had left and they said, do you believe that James Earl Ray killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? And I said, let me just tell you this. Dr. King's wife, Miss Coretta Scott King, went to the prison in Memphis, Tennessee with her children, Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice. And they met with Mr. James Earl Ray in his cell in the prison. They stayed for several hours. And Mrs. King came out with her children and held a news conference. And she said, we have talked to Mr. Ray, we've interviewed Mr. Ray, we asked Mr. Ray a lot of questions, and we do not believe as a family that Mr. Ray killed my husband. Now that was the statement from Dr. King's wife, his widow, Mrs. Coretta Scott King. After visiting with James Earl Ray, she said, we don't believe it. They never believed it in the first place. But after talking to him, interviewing him, their position was reaffirmed. And I believe Mrs. King and the children knew that this man was not guilty of murdering Dr. King. He was used by the government, the federal government, children. But you got to grow and study this. You're too young to get into it right now. Just grow and keep studying and keep reading and just do your own investigative work as you grow and matriculate, because you will finally discover that Mr. James Earl Ray was not the one to kill Dr. King. Now here's an eerie thing I need to add on to his question. Here's something eerie about James Earl Ray. I was in social circle on April 4th, 1968, because Jose Williams, my supervisor at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, said, we don't want you to come to Memphis, we want you to stay in Walton County, because Dr. King and Abernathy are going to fly in from Memphis. And they're going to take on the Moore's Wood case, and when they leave Walton County, we want you to go to Washington, D.C. to start working on the Poor People's Campaign. But guess what? I was called back to SCLC the evening of Dr. King's assassination. And that night, I went to Memphis, Tennessee with Willie Bolden and his wife. I drove their car from Atlanta to Memphis. And along the route, I didn't know it then, I met James Earl Ray. I'm driving Willie Bolden's Thunderbird, and James Earl Ray is coming from Memphis to Atlanta in his Mustang, 1965 Mustang. I'm driving Willie Bolden's 1968 Thunderbird, and we met on the highway. We met. You know, like you're driving up 78 with your parents, and you meet me coming down the road, you know, I'm coming this way, you're going that way, and you don't realize it. Well, that evening we met on that highway. I didn't realize it until about 5 years ago. I was called to do an interview over at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper, downtown Atlanta. And the reporter, Jim Arkmoody, said, we know the timeline of you leaving Atlanta that evening, and we know the timeline of James Earl Ray leaving Memphis coming to Atlanta, and do you realize you met each other on that highway? I said, what? He said, you met James Earl Ray that night. We're going to Memphis, he's coming to Atlanta. His car was found in downtown Atlanta in a housing project right up from the state capitol. They found his car parked there. So we met on the highway. That's kind of eerie, isn't it? It's eerie. When I was told, I said, wow, I can't believe it. You have a question back here, then we're going to come over here. Come up here so they can hear your question. We got to try to move it around, y'all. Sample. Get a sample here, sample there, sample here, sample there. What's your name?
Cheyenne King.
Yeah. What's your question?
What was Martin Luther King like?
From my observation as a child, as a student, and growing up in his organization, what I saw was a very friendly man, a very easy to talk to person, just simple, down to earth. Yeah, I mean, if he was in this school, you could walk up to him and have a conversation. He might come in and sit down in your cafeteria and have lunch with you. Might grab a piece of pizza off your plate, bite it. That's what I observed as a young. I wasn't old enough to be in his inner circle of cabinet. So as an observer or from a distance, what I saw was a very friendly man, a simple guy who would walk up and down the street, Auburn Avenue, go into the restaurants, get in the corner, get some iced tea, get a plate of ribs, and just sit back and talk to people all day long. Very, very down-to-earth man, easy to talk to. My supervisors, Reverend Jose Williams, Dr. Ralph Abernathy, will tell me a lot of stories about Dr. King. Ambassador Andrew Young says, Dr. King loved neck bones. How many of you ever had neck bones? Mama, daddy, grandparents cook neck bones? I love neck bones. You probably don't know what neck bones are. You've already had them and don't know it. But he said he loved that soul food that grandmamas cook. Okay, I'm going to go on this side. Now, Susan, you tell us when to cut it off.
We got 5 minutes.
We got 5 minutes to go. Okay, Mr. Man in the yellow shirt here. Come out, Mr. Man in the yellow shirt. What's your name?
Caleb Allen.
All right, Mr. Allen.
What was the year that Martin Luther King was born?
He was born on January the 15th, 1929. And my mother was born on January 15, 1909.